The late afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Cole's sleek, minimalist apartment. The city sprawled out before him, its vibrant hum muted by the thick glass that separated him from the chaos below. Ethan, clad in a tailored gray suit, stood motionless, holding a pristine white envelope embossed with gold lettering. The invitation inside carried an elegant script that twisted a knife in his chest. Rachel Bennett and Michael Carter request the honor of your presence at their wedding. He read it again, the words blurring slightly. It had been a year since Rachel had walked out of his life, frustrated by his relentless dedication to work and his inability to prioritize her. Ethan had told himself he was over it, that burying himself in work was the best way to move on. But the sight of her name, now paired with someone else's, reopened a wound he had convinced himself had healed. Ethan placed the invitation on the marble countertop and ran a hand through his neatly styled hair. He had no intention of attending, but the thought of skipping it filled him with an unfamiliar bitterness. Wouldn't she love that? He thought, imagining Rachel assuming he was too hurt to show up. Yet the prospect of arriving alone, a symbol of everything she had accused him of being, too busy, too isolated, was unbearable. His phone buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a notification about an upcoming meeting, a reminder of the work that never stopped. But for once, the pull of his career didn't quiet the turmoil in his chest. Grabbing his coat, Ethan decided to clear his head with a walk, something he hadn't done in ages. The streets were alive with the usual chaos of city life, the honking of horns, snippets of hurried conversations, and the aroma of street food wafting through the air. Ethan walked aimlessly, letting the rhythm of the city distract him from his inner turmoil. As he turned down a quieter street, his gaze landed on a woman sitting on the corner. She looked up as he approached, her expression calm but guarded. Her clothes were worn, and her hair was pulled back into a loose bun that seemed more practical than stylish. Despite her circumstances, there was a quiet dignity in her posture and a warmth in her gaze. She held a small sign that read, "Looking for work. Anything helps." Ethan slowed his pace, something about her stopping him in his tracks. Her presence seemed out of place amidst the bustling city backdrop, not in a way that suggested she didn't belong, but in a way that made him feel as though she carried a story he couldn't yet understand. "Hi," he said, his voice soft as he crouched down to meet her eye level. "I'm Ethan." The woman blinked in surprise but offered him a tentative smile. "Ivy," she replied. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, and carried an air of quiet strength. "Nice to meet you, Ethan." "What brings you here?" he asked, gesturing vaguely to her spot on the sidewalk. She gave a small shrug, her smile faltering for a moment. "Life has its way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? I'm just trying to get back on my feet." Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to such candid conversations, especially not with strangers. Still, he found himself wanting to know more. "Do you have family around here? Friends?" Ivy's gaze flickered down to her hands. "Not anymore," she admitted, though there was no self-pity in her tone. "But I'm managing." For a moment, Ethan was struck by the contrast between them. Here he was, a man with more resources than he could ever use, grappling with loneliness and frustration. And here was Ivy, with almost nothing to her name, facing life with a resilience he couldn't fathom. "Do you have plans this weekend?" The question tumbled out of his mouth before he had a chance to think it through. Ivy tilted her head, her brow furrowing. "Not really. Why?" Ethan hesitated, suddenly feeling ridiculous. "I have this wedding to attend, and I could use some company. I know it's a strange thing to ask, but would you consider coming with me?" Ivy stared at him, her expression a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "You're asking me, a stranger on the street, to be your date to a wedding?" Ethan laughed nervously, running a hand through his hair. "When you put it that way, it does sound a bit strange, but I mean it. I'll make sure you have a dress, a nice meal, everything. I just, don't want to go alone." Ivy's gaze softened, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "Why me?" she asked, her tone gentle rather than accusatory. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "There's something about you. You seem grounded, I guess. And I could use a little of that right now." The silence stretched between them as Ivy considered his offer. Finally, she gave a small nod. "All right, Ethan. I'll go." As Ethan walked back to his apartment, Ivy's agreement replayed in his mind. He wasn't entirely sure what had compelled him to ask her or why he felt a surge of relief at her answer. All he knew was that, for the first time in months, he felt a flicker of anticipation for what lay ahead. The next day, Ethan guided Ivy through the gleaming glass doors of one of the city's most exclusive boutiques, the soft chime of the entrance bell signaling their arrival. The air inside was fragrant with a blend of high-end perfumes, and the soft hum of classical music played in the background. Mannequins dressed in elegant gowns and tailored suits stood as silent sentinels, their presence both alluring and intimidating. Ivy paused just inside the doorway, her eyes scanning the luxurious interior. Her worn sneakers and faded jeans stood in sharp contrast to the opulence around her. She hesitated, shifting her weight as if unsure whether she belonged in a place like this. "It's a bit much, isn't it?" Ethan said, offering her a reassuring smile. "But trust me, they'll treat you like royalty." "Are you sure about this?" Ivy asked, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't want to embarrass you." Ethan shook his head. "You couldn't embarrass me if you tried. Let's do this together, okay?" She nodded, though her apprehension lingered. Ethan led her further inside, where a sharp-eyed attendant in a perfectly tailored black suit approached them. The man's gaze flicked briefly to Ivy, his expression unreadable before he turned his attention to Ethan. "Good afternoon, sir. How may we assist you today?" the attendant asked smoothly. "I'd like to help my friend here find a dress for an event," Ethan replied, his tone polite but firm. "Something elegant. Something special." The attendant's professional demeanor didn't waver, but Ivy caught the subtle shift in his posture as he appraised her again. She braced herself for judgment, but when Ethan shot the man a pointed look, the attendant nodded. "Of course, sir. Please follow me." Soon, Ivy found herself ensconced in a plush dressing room, the walls lined with mirrors that reflected her from every angle. Stylists bustled around her, carrying armfuls of fabric in every imaginable shade and texture. They moved quickly and efficiently, their voices a soothing hum as they offered suggestions and compliments. Ivy's initial discomfort began to ebb away, replaced by a sense of wonder. The dresses they brought her were unlike anything she had ever worn. Soft silks, flowing chiffons, and delicate lace that seemed too beautiful to touch. When she slipped into the first gown, a deep emerald green, and stepped out of the dressing room, the room fell silent. Ethan, who had been waiting patiently in a chair by the large window, stood as soon as he saw her. His eyes widened slightly, and a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "You look..." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "You look incredible." Ivy turned to the mirror, her breath catching. The dress fit her perfectly, the rich green fabric bringing out the warmth in her brown eyes. For a moment, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. The worn-out, invisible person she had been felt like a distant memory. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her fingers brushing the delicate material. "I don't even know if I can walk in something like this." Ethan laughed softly. "You'll do more than walk. You'll own the room." The stylists beamed at Ethan's approval and went to work completing the look. They styled Ivy's hair into loose, elegant waves that framed her face, then applied subtle makeup that enhanced her natural beauty without overshadowing it. By the time they were done, Ivy hardly recognized herself. Her reflection showed not just a transformation of appearance, but a renewal of confidence she hadn't felt in years. As they left the boutique, Ivy carried a garment bag with the dress and a pair of sparkling heels. Ethan glanced at her, noting the slight smile on her lips. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked as they strolled down the busy sidewalk. Ivy hesitated before answering. "I guess I feel different, not because of the dress or the makeup, but because someone thought I was worth the effort. It's been a long time since I felt like I mattered." Ethan's chest tightened at her words. You do matter, Ivy. You've been through so much, but you haven't let it break you. That's something to be proud of. Ivy looked at him, her eyes searching his for any hint of insincerity. She found none. Thank you, she said softly, for all of this. You don't owe me any thanks, Ethan replied. If anything, I should be thanking you. You've reminded me that there's more to life than work and regrets. Later that evening, they found themselves in a quiet cafe near Ethan's apartment. The warm glow of the overhead lights and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee created a cozy atmosphere. Over steaming cups of tea, they began to talk in earnest. Ivy shared fragments of her story, how she had once been a receptionist at a small company, living paycheck to paycheck but managing to stay afloat. Then, a sudden layoff had set off a chain reaction, a missed rent payment, the loss of her apartment, and the slow unraveling of her stability. She spoke of the small acts of kindness that had kept her going. A stranger's sandwich, a warm blanket offered on a cold night. I learned to stop expecting anything, Ivy said, her voice steady, but tinged with sadness. When you stop expecting, you stop being disappointed. Ethan's heart ached at her words. You shouldn't have to live like that, he said, his tone firm. You deserve more. She smiled faintly. We all deserve more, but I've learned to make the most of what I have. Ethan nodded, respect for her growing with every word. In turn, he shared his own struggles, how his obsession with building a successful career had cost him relationships, especially with Rachel. For the first time, he admitted how deeply her departure had affected him, leaving him questioning his priorities and his worth. I thought if I just worked harder, achieved more, it would fix everything, Ethan said, his voice low. But it didn't. It only made me more alone. Ivy reached across the table and placed a hand on his. You're not alone anymore, she said simply. By the time they returned to Ethan's apartment, the connection between them had deepened. The initial awkwardness of their meeting had given way to a genuine understanding, a shared sense of having faced life's challenges and survived. As Ivy prepared to leave for the night, she paused in the doorway. Ethan, she said, her voice hesitant. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but thank you for making me feel like a person again. Ethan smiled, his gaze warm. I didn't make you feel that way, Ivy. You just needed someone to remind you of what you've always been. For the first time in years, Ivy felt a spark of hope. As she stepped into the night, the dress bag slung over her shoulder, she carried with her not just the trappings of elegance, but the beginnings of a renewed sense of self-worth. And for Ethan, watching her walk away, he realized that the invitation to Rachel's wedding had been less about the past and more about the future. A future that, for the first time, felt full of possibility. The grand venue was a sight to behold, bathed in the soft glow of fairy lights strung from towering arches and glittering chandeliers that hung from the vaulted ceiling. The polished marble floors reflected the grandeur of the decor, ornate gold accents, cascading floral arrangements, and elegantly dressed waitstaff who moved like clockwork through the sea of guests. It was the kind of wedding that screamed perfection, a celebration of wealth and status as much as love. Ethan adjusted the cufflinks on his tailored suit as he stepped out of the car, glancing at Ivy beside him. She was a vision in the emerald green dress, her hair cascading in soft waves and her makeup accentuating her natural beauty. The transformation was complete. She radiated confidence and elegance, yet she carried herself with a quiet grace that was entirely her own. Are you ready for this? Ethan asked, offering her his arm. Ivy took a deep breath, her nerves barely concealed beneath a poised exterior. As ready as I'll ever be. Together, they stepped into the venue, the double doors opening to reveal the splendor within. The chatter of the crowd ebbed momentarily as heads turned toward the entrance. For a few seconds, the room seemed to hold its breath. Whispers began to ripple through the sea of well-dressed attendees, their curiosity piqued by the striking woman at Ethan's side. Rachel stood near the far end of the hall, her wedding dress a masterpiece of lace and pearls. She was in the midst of greeting guests when she caught sight of Ethan and Ivy entering. Her smile faltered ever so slightly, the momentary lapse almost imperceptible to those around her. But her grip on the bouquet tightened, betraying the unease she felt. Ethan noticed her reaction and squared his shoulders, offering Ivy a reassuring smile. "Let's make an impression," he whispered. Ivy nodded, leaning into the moment. She moved with a confidence that belied the pounding of her heart, her every step exuding a dignity that silenced the murmurs around them. As they made their way through the crowd, Ethan introduced Ivy to a series of acquaintances. Each introduction was met with polite smiles and the occasional thinly veiled glance of judgment. Ivy, however, handled herself with remarkable poise. Her responses were measured and her demeanor was warm. "You're full of surprises, Ethan," one guest remarked, their tone laced with curiosity. "Your date is quite charming." "She is," Ethan replied firmly, his gaze steady. "Ivy's one of the most remarkable people I've ever met." Ivy felt a flicker of warmth at his words, the sincerity in his voice steadying her nerves. She refused to let the opinions of strangers diminish her. Instead, she focused on the kindness she saw in some of the faces, drawing strength from the compliments she received. It wasn't long before Rachel approached them, her expression a careful mask of composure. Her new husband lingered nearby, engaged in conversation with a group of friends. "Ethan," Rachel greeted, her voice measured but tinged with surprise. "It's been a while." "It has," Ethan replied, his tone neutral but polite. "Congratulations, Rachel. The wedding is beautiful." Her eyes flickered to Ivy, a mixture of curiosity and unease crossing her face. "And you must be—" "Ivy Moore," Ivy said, extending a hand. Her voice was calm, her smile unwavering. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Your wedding is stunning." Rachel hesitated before shaking Ivy's hand, her own smile strained. "Thank you. I hope you're enjoying yourself." "We are," Ethan interjected smoothly. "It's a lovely evening." The exchange was brief, but the tension lingered as Rachel excused herself to greet another guest. Ivy caught the flicker of something in Rachel's eyes, regret, perhaps, or jealousy, but she dismissed it, focusing instead on the warmth of Ethan's presence beside her. As the evening wore on, the orchestra struck up a slow, romantic tune. Ethan turned to Ivy with a smile. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his hand. "I haven't danced in years," Ivy admitted, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "There's no better time to start," Ethan replied, his tone reassuring. She took his hand, allowing him to lead her onto the dance floor. The room seemed to fade away as they began to move, the music wrapping around them like a cocoon. Ivy's initial awkwardness melted into a natural rhythm, and she found herself smiling as Ethan guided her effortlessly through the steps. "You're a natural," Ethan said softly, his voice warm. "Hardly," Ivy replied with a laugh, "but I'll take the compliment." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. There was something unspoken between them, a connection that had grown quietly over the past few days, but now felt undeniable. Rachel watched from the edge of the room, her gaze fixed on Ethan and Ivy as they moved together. The jealousy she felt was sharp, an unwelcome reminder of what she had once had with Ethan. But deeper than that was a pang of regret. She had ended things with him because she felt he prioritized work over her. Now, seeing him with Ivy, so present and engaged, she wondered if she had been too quick to judge. "Is everything all right?" her husband asked, his tone concerned. Rachel forced a smile. "Of course. Everything's perfect." But the unease lingered as she turned her attention back to her guests, unable to shake the image of Ethan and Ivy's easy laughter on the dance floor. After the dance, Ethan and Ivy stepped outside to the quiet terrace. The cool night air was a welcome contrast to the warmth of the crowded room. "Thank you for that," Ivy said, her voice soft. "I didn't realize how much I needed it." Ethan leaned on the railing, looking out at the city lights. "You've made this night more meaningful than I ever expected. Thank you for saying yes." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Ivy spoke again. "You didn't just bring me here to make Rachel jealous, did you?" Ethan turned to face her, his expression earnest. No. At first maybe it was a little impulsive, but spending time with you, getting to know you, it's become something much more than that. Ivy searched his eyes, finding only sincerity. A small smile tugged at her lips. Good, because I'd hate to think this was all for show. It's not, Ethan said firmly. This is real. Inside, the wedding continued, but for Ethan and Ivy, the evening had shifted. As they rejoined the party, their bond felt stronger, their connection deeper. The judgmental glances and whispered gossip no longer mattered. Together, they navigated the complexities of the night with grace and authenticity. For Rachel, watching them from a distance, the evening was a reminder of what she had lost, and perhaps what she had never truly appreciated. But for Ethan and Ivy, it was the beginning of something new, something neither of them had anticipated, but both were eager to explore. The wedding reception was in full swing, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses mingling with the soft strains of the orchestra. The air buzzed with a warmth that only came from celebration, but for Ethan, there was an unmistakable tension simmering beneath the surface. As Ivy stepped away momentarily to chat with a friendly guest, Ethan found himself standing alone near the entrance to the garden. He had been enjoying the evening more than he anticipated, the connection he shared with Ivy growing stronger with every passing hour. But his peaceful moment was interrupted when Rachel appeared, her expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough emotion to catch his attention. "Can we talk?" He turned to her, surprised by her approach. "Of course," he said, his tone polite but guarded. Rachel motioned toward the garden. "Somewhere more private?" Ethan hesitated, glancing back toward the crowd. He didn't want Ivy to feel abandoned, or for this to be misconstrued. Still, he nodded, following Rachel into the dimly lit garden. The garden was quiet, illuminated by the soft glow of fairy lights. Rachel stopped by a stone bench, turning to face Ethan. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, regret, or perhaps longing. "I didn't expect to feel this way tonight," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Seeing you here, with her, it brought back so many memories." Ethan crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Rachel, it's your wedding. You should be happy." "I am happy," she insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. "But I can't help but wonder if I made a mistake. When we broke up, I thought it was the right thing to do. You were always so focused on work, and I felt like I was never a priority. But seeing you tonight, how different you are with her, it's made me question everything." Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Rachel, we ended things for a reason. I wasn't the partner you needed, and you made a choice that was right for you at the time. But I've moved on." She looked away, her shoulders sagging. "I know I shouldn't feel this way. It's selfish of me to say anything, but I couldn't keep it to myself." Ethan's voice softened, though he remained firm. "Rachel, I appreciate your honesty, but I've found someone who brings out the best in me. Ivy's made me realize that I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I'm not here to make you jealous or to dredge up the past. I'm here because I want to build something new, with her." Rachel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I hope you find happiness, Ethan. Truly." "Thank you, Rachel. I hope you do too." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips, and stepped back toward the reception hall. As she disappeared into the crowd, Ethan let out a sigh, feeling a strange sense of closure. Unbeknownst to him, Ivy had overheard part of their conversation. She had returned to the garden, intending to find Ethan, but had stopped short when she saw him with Rachel. The fragments she heard, Rachel's regret, Ethan's name paired with phrases like memories and mistake, sent a wave of uncertainty through her. She had started to walk away, but something made her pause. When Ethan re-entered the garden, Ivy was waiting near a fountain, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was guarded, her usual calm replaced with apprehension. "Ivy," Ethan said, his brows knitting in concern, "is everything okay?" She hesitated, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. I couldn't help but overhear part of your conversation with Rachel. I need to know. Am I just a part of this closure you're seeking? A way to show her you've moved on? Ethan's heart sank as he realized how the situation must have looked. He stepped closer, his voice earnest. Ivy, no. That's not what this is. She searched his eyes, her doubts bubbling to the surface. I don't want to be a placeholder, Ethan. I've spent too much time feeling like I'm not enough, and I can't go through that again. He reached out, gently taking her hands in his. You're not a placeholder, Ivy. You're not some rebound or a symbol to prove something to anyone else. You're here because I care about you, because I see something in you that's real and inspiring. Her lips trembled as she tried to hold back tears. It's hard not to feel like this is all too good to be true. You've given me so much in just a few days, but part of me keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ethan's grip on her hands tightened, his voice unwavering. Ivy, I don't know what the future holds, but I know what I feel right now. You've brought something into my life I didn't know I was missing. You've reminded me of what truly matters, and it's not about proving something to Rachel or anyone else. It's about finding joy in the present, and in you. Ivy looked down for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. When she finally met his gaze, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. You really mean that? Every word, he said softly. The tension between them began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of mutual understanding. Ivy allowed herself to lean into the moment, her walls slowly coming down. For the first time in years, she felt like she could trust someone, not just with her heart, but with her dreams and her vulnerabilities. I'm sorry for doubting you, she said quietly. It's just hard to believe in something good when life's thrown so much at you. I understand, Ethan replied, but you don't have to face it alone anymore. They stood there in the garden, the cool night air wrapping around them like a protective cocoon. The sounds of the wedding faded into the background as they focused solely on each other. Back in the reception hall, Rachel watched them from a distance, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She had made her choice, and while part of her regretted letting Ethan go, she could see now that he was happy, truly happy, in a way he had never been with her. A bittersweet smile tugged at her lips as she raised a glass to toast the couple she hadn't expected to impact her so deeply. As the evening wore on, Ethan and Ivy returned to the reception, their bond stronger than before. They danced again, this time with a newfound ease that spoke of their growing connection. Guests who had initially judged Ivy found themselves charmed by her grace and authenticity, their whispers turning from gossip to admiration. When the night finally came to an end, Ethan and Ivy stepped out into the cool air, hand in hand. The city lights sparkled in the distance, a reminder of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Thank you, Ivy said softly, glancing up at Ethan. For everything. No, Ethan replied, his voice filled with quiet conviction. Thank you, Ivy, for being exactly who you are. As they walked away from the venue, their hearts lighter and their paths intertwined, they both knew that what had started as an unexpected invitation had grown into something far more meaningful, a chance to rewrite their stories and embrace a future built on trust, hope, and love. The night air was crisp as Ethan and Ivy stepped out of the grand wedding venue, leaving the glittering chandeliers, polite applause, and lingering whispers behind. The streets were quiet now, a stark contrast to the bustling celebration they had just departed. Ivy took a deep breath, savoring the coolness that seemed to cleanse her of the evening's intensity. Ethan glanced at her as they walked side by side, her hand tucked lightly into the crook of his arm. Are you sure you don't mind leaving early? He asked, his voice gentle. Ivy smiled, a quiet confidence radiating from her. I think we've had enough drama for one night. Besides, this feels better. Just us. He nodded, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. You're right. Let's make the most of it. As they strolled down the dimly lit street, their footsteps the only sound, Ethan felt a newfound ease settle over him. The weight of the evening, the confrontation with Rachel, the lingering judgment of the guests, seemed to dissipate with every step. Beside him, Ivy moved gracefully, her once nervous demeanor replaced by a quiet strength that Ethan found magnetic. They passed a small cafe with a warm glow spilling from its windows. "How about we stop here?" Ethan suggested, gesturing toward the inviting space. "I could use a coffee, or maybe dessert." Ivy laughed, her eyes lighting up. "Dessert sounds good. Let's do it." Inside, the cafe was cozy, filled with the comforting aroma of fresh pastries and brewed coffee. The couple found a corner table near the window, the city's lights twinkling in the background. A waiter approached, and Ethan ordered a slice of chocolate cake and a cappuccino for himself, while Ivy opted for a slice of lemon tart and tea. As they waited, the conversation flowed easily. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression contemplative. "You know, I didn't expect tonight to turn out the way it did," he admitted. "But I'm glad it did." Ivy tilted her head, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "Why's that?" "Because I got to meet you," he said simply, his tone earnest. "You've changed the way I see things, about myself, about life. It's refreshing." She blushed, looking down at her hands. "I could say the same about you. I didn't think anyone would ever see me as anything more than, well, someone trying to get by." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You're so much more than that, Ivy, and I want to know more about you. What are your dreams, your hopes? What do you see for yourself in the future?" Ivy hesitated, caught off guard by the sincerity of his question. No one had asked her about her dreams in years, and she had almost forgotten how to answer. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I used to dream of opening a small shop, something creative," she began, her voice tinged with both nostalgia and longing. "Maybe a place where I could sell handmade jewelry or crafts. I've always loved working with my hands, making things that bring joy to people." Ethan's expression softened. "That sounds amazing. Why didn't you pursue it?" She shrugged, a hint of sadness in her smile. "Life happened. Bills needed paying, and survival became the priority. Dreams got pushed aside." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "But it's not too late. If that's what you want, you can still make it happen." Her gaze met his, a flicker of hope sparking in her eyes. "Do you really think so?" "Absolutely," he said firmly. "You've already shown how resilient and resourceful you are. I have no doubt you can do anything you set your mind to." Their conversation deepened as they shared more about themselves. Ethan spoke about his demanding career, the pressure to succeed, and how it had cost him his relationship with Rachel. Ivy, in turn, shared stories of her struggles, the moments of despair that had threatened to consume her, and the small acts of kindness from strangers that had kept her going. Their desserts arrived, and the sweet flavors seemed to mirror the growing sweetness of their connection. Ethan took a bite of his cake and chuckled. "This might be the best decision I've made all night." Ivy grinned, savoring her lemon tart. "It's definitely up there, but I think leaving the wedding takes the top spot." They laughed together, the sound filling the cozy cafe and drawing a few curious glances from other patrons. For the first time in what felt like forever, both of them felt truly at ease, the burdens of their past temporarily forgotten in the warmth of each other's company. As the evening wore on, Ethan glanced at his watch. "It's getting late. Should I walk you home?" Ivy hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. I don't really have a home," she admitted quietly. "I've been staying in a shelter, but it's not permanent." Ethan's heart ached at her words. He had known she was struggling, but hearing it spoken so plainly hit him harder than he expected. "Ivy," he began gently, "you don't have to face this alone. If you ever need help, or even just someone to talk to, I'm here." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan. That means more than I can say." They left the cafe together, the city now quiet and still under the night sky. As they walked, Ethan felt a growing resolve take hold of him. Ivy wasn't just a passing presence in his life. She was someone who had already changed him in profound ways, and he wanted to help her in any way he could. When they reached the shelter, Ivy paused at the entrance, turning to face him. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice sincere. "It's been incredible. I'll never forget it." Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. "Neither will I. And this isn't the end, Ivy. It's just the beginning." She nodded, a mixture of hope and uncertainty in her expression. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Ivy." As she disappeared into the shelter, Ethan stood there for a moment, his thoughts swirling. Tonight had been unexpected in every way, but it had also been transformative. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose that went beyond his work or his past relationships. Ivy had reminded him of the importance of connection, of taking risks, and of believing in something greater than himself. As he walked away, the city lights guiding his path, Ethan couldn't help but smile. This wasn't just a new chapter in his life, it was a new beginning, and he was ready to embrace it, one step at a time, with Ivy by his side. Ethan's life took on a new rhythm in the weeks and months following the wedding. What had started as an impulsive gesture, a date to a wedding, had evolved into something far more meaningful. His connection with Ivy had deepened in ways he hadn't anticipated, creating a bond that was both grounding and transformative. The two began to spend more time together, each learning from the other in ways that enriched their lives. For Ivy, the journey to rebuild her life began with small steps. She had shared her dream of opening a craft shop with Ethan on the night of the wedding, and he had taken it to heart. One afternoon, he surprised her by bringing her to a small community center that offered free workshops and resources for aspiring entrepreneurs. "I thought this might be a good place to start," Ethan said, gesturing to the cozy building bustling with creative energy. "They have classes on business planning, marketing, and even grant writing." Ivy's eyes widened as she took in the possibilities. This is incredible. I don't know what to say."
"Say you'll give it a shot," Ethan replied with an encouraging smile. "You've got the talent, Ivy. This is just a way to help you get started."
Buoyed by Ethan's unwavering support, Ivy enrolled in the workshops, attending every session with a determination that amazed even herself. She began to sketch designs for jewelry and crafts, rediscovering the joy and creativity that had once been a part of her identity. Slowly but surely, her confidence grew, and she started to see herself not as someone defined by her past struggles, but as someone with a future full of potential. While Ivy was rediscovering her dreams, Ethan found himself rethinking his own priorities. His career, once the sole focus of his life, began to take a back seat to the relationships that now mattered most to him. For years, he had equated success with long hours at the office and impressive financial achievements. But Ivy's resilience and perspective had opened his eyes to the importance of balance and the fulfillment that came from genuine human connections. One evening, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the city skyline, Ethan shared his thoughts with Ivy. "I used to think that my career was everything," he admitted, his gaze distant. "But now I realize that all the success in the world means nothing if you don't have people to share it with." Ivy looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You can still have both, Ethan, success and meaningful relationships. It's about finding the right balance." Her words stayed with him, and over time, Ethan began making changes. He delegated more responsibilities at work, allowing himself the freedom to explore other aspects of life that he had long neglected. He spent more time with Ivy, with his family, and even began volunteering at the community center, where Ivy was taking her workshops. The shift wasn't easy, but it was worth it. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of wholeness that work alone had never provided. As their lives intertwined, Ethan and Ivy began to create a shared vision for the future. Ivy's progress in the workshops led to her being awarded a small grant to start her craft business. With Ethan's help, she rented a modest studio space where she could work on her designs and eventually sell her creations. The studio became a sanctuary for Ivy, a place where she could pour her energy and passion into her work. Ethan, ever the planner, helped her with the logistical aspects of running the business. He taught her how to track expenses, manage inventory, and market her products online. But he was careful not to overshadow her vision, always letting Ivy take the lead. "This is your dream," he reminded her one day as they worked together to set up the studio. "I'm just here to support you." Ivy smiled, her gratitude evident. "I couldn't have done this without you, Ethan. You've believed in me every step of the way." "And I always will," he replied, his voice steady. As Ivy's business grew, so did the bond between her and Ethan. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to growth, not just individually, but together. They supported each other through challenges, celebrated each other's victories, and found joy in the simple moments of everyday life. One weekend, they hosted a small event at Ivy's studio to showcase her work. Friends from the community center, Ethan's colleagues, and a handful of local customers attended, filling the space with laughter and warm conversations. As Ivy stood at the front of the room to thank everyone for their support, Ethan watched her with pride. She had come so far from the quiet woman he had met on the street corner, and he felt privileged to have been a part of her journey. "Ivy," he said later that evening as they cleaned up after the event, "you've created something incredible here. You're an inspiration, not just to me, but to everyone who's seen what you've accomplished." She blushed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ethan. We've built this together." In time, their partnership became a testament to the transformative power of resilience and connection. Ethan's life was no longer defined by the pursuit of professional success. It was enriched by his relationship with Ivy and the sense of purpose they had found together. Ivy, in turn, had rediscovered her confidence and her dreams, becoming a beacon of hope for others facing similar struggles. Their journey wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, setbacks in Ivy's business, and difficult decisions to navigate. But through it all, they remained steadfast in their commitment to each other and to the life they were building together. One evening as they sat together in the studio, the soft glow of string lights casting a warm ambiance, Ethan turned to Ivy with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he began, taking her hand in his, "about what we've built here, what you've built. It's more than just a business. It's a symbol of everything we've overcome." Ivy looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "It's our legacy, Ethan. A reminder that no matter how hard life gets, there's always a way forward." He nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "And I want to keep building that legacy with you." At that moment, their shared vision became a promise, a commitment to continue growing, learning, and supporting each other in the years to come. Their story was no longer just about overcoming the past. It was about creating a future filled with purpose, love, and endless possibilities. As they sat together, dreaming of what lay ahead, Ethan and Ivy knew that their journey was far from over. But they were ready to face it, hand in hand, knowing that together they could achieve anything. Their legacy of growth was just beginning, and it was a story they would write together, one chapter at a time. As Ethan and Ivy continued their journey, their lives became a testament to the power of resilience, love, and transformation. What began as an unexpected invitation had blossomed into a shared vision of hope and growth. Together, they proved that life's toughest challenges could be stepping stones to a brighter future. Ivy's business thrived, becoming not just a success but a source of inspiration for others in the community. Her story showed that no matter how far one might fall, with determination and the right support, it's always possible to rise again. Ethan, too, had transformed. Once consumed by work, he now found fulfillment in meaningful connections and a balanced life. Their journey reminds us all that the bonds we forge, the risks we take, and the compassion we show can lead to extraordinary outcomes. No matter where you start, every step forward brings you closer to a better tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that growth is always possible and love can come from the most unexpected places. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more uplifting stories of courage, transformation, and hope. Your support keeps us going and inspires us to share more tales that remind us of the beauty in life's journeys. Let's keep walking this path together, See you in the next story.